Happy Thanksgiving, Buff fans. Good morning to all. Troy and I are back with another episode of CU Sports Report podcast. Buffs coming off a tough week against Kansas. They took a loss with Devin McNeil running for 207 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and a receiving touchdown. They took some notes out of Kansas State's playbook and did a very good job executing with offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes calling those plays, but we'll get into that. The Buffs basketball are in Maui. They won a huge game against number 2 UConn, but fell against Michigan State in the opening round and lost against Iowa State, number 5 Iowa State last night in a 28-point loss. So we learned a lot about that team during the Invitational, and the Buffs women played against Utah Tech. They won 85-73. So some wins, some losses this week, but Buffs are playing Oklahoma State, a 0-8 team in conference, 3-8 overall. They have not had a good season. Very underwhelming for a team that was projected to finish 3rd in the conference. So Mike Gundy is not having a good time, and the Buffs have their senior day this Friday at 10 a.m. after Thanksgiving. Should be fun. I'm excited for another early kick and to see what the future holds for the Buffs, because after that loss against Kansas, they do not possess a clear path and don't have control over their destiny anymore. So there is a 4-way tie at the top of the Big 12, and everything doesn't really favor Colorado at the moment. We'll get into scenarios and tiebreakers and all the confusing things, but first, recruiting. I'm going to start with some recruiting. Something may happen today. I think you guys should just keep an eye out. It looks like something is happening on Nightcap with Ocho Cinco and Shannon Sharp. So tune into that, and maybe, you'll be like, okay, Nikki was right about something for once. We're going to be talking to Coach Prime on Tuesday. Jake, shout out Jake from DMVR, asked about recruiting, and Coach Prime had this just recruiting and what the future holds for Colorado. And he said, we're going to be straight. We got what we want. We don't take a lot of high school players, and the ones that we take, we want them to play immediately. We're going to hit the portal like it hasn't been hit before. We're going to do some good things in replacing players, and we plan to bring on some tremendous talent. We already know that Julian Lewis will be I don't know if he's going to be at the quarterback position, but he will be battling for that quarterback spot next year, as Shore Sanders will be leaving. We'll see if Ryan Staub enters the portal, but that will be all in the future. But on the Buff side of things, 4-star IMG prospect, defensive end London Merritt has decommitted from Ohio State. Sorry, there's like something in my eye. Yeah, he decommitted from Ohio State, and according to Rivals, he has 100% future cast for Colorado. So that looks like a promising one that will potentially come in the future. Colorado's really racking up a lot of IMG prospects. Cardi Smith isn't one of them, but he announced his commitment date for December 4th. And his future cast is currently tied with Auburn and Colorado, but the way he's been interacting on social media, it seems like Colorado is kind of a heavy favorite. This is just an opinion, but those are the 2 schools that are vying for him following his decommitment, and December 4th will be the day that he commits. 5-star outside linebacker, also an IMG prospect, Nathaniel Owusu-Petang. It's still a battle between Notre Dame and Michigan, but Colorado is definitely still a heavy favorite to flip him, and he is a very talented outside linebacker, and Colorado is continuing to get these IMG guys. The next IMG guy is 5-star offensive tackle Michael Carroll. He is a real player that's in the mix for Colorado right now. I mean, he was Jordan Seaton's teammate, and they have some familiarity there. And with the Buffs landing Julian Lewis, it seems like things are trending in that direction to secure another 5-star commitment, which would be the first time that Deion has secured 2 5-star commitments in his coaching career in the same year. So yeah, those same guys, London Merritt, Nathaniel Owusu-Petang, Michael Carroll, are all guys to watch out for, guys that we've been talking about for a few weeks now. On the transfer side of things, I found this out yesterday. Senior offensive tackle at Oklahoma State, he's in the transfer portal. He's 6'3", 310 pounds, and a lot of schools are vying for him because he has a lot of experience. I don't know which position he plays on the line. I didn't look at that, but he has Duke, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Houston, Colorado and Texas A&M have all reached out for him. And as we, talk with Coach Prime on Monday, they have a really strategic plan and replacing these key positions. A lot of defensive end guys are going to draft or graduating. There's going to be, as we know, there's going to be a lot of, I think, shoes to fill there. And the transfer portal was once again going to be a spot where Colorado really capitalizes and fills those, roster spots. Potentially even a quarterback. That'll be something interesting to watch because Julian Lewis might need a year or two. Well, might need like a year to develop, but we'll see where Colorado wants to kind of assign and figure out that position. And three-star defensive end, also 9G prospect, Alec McPherson. He's heavily been on Colorado's radar. And he took a visit last week. And we'll see where he goes to or where his commitment may land. So those are all my recruiting notes. Quick rundown, and Colorado still doing the thing. And we'll flip over to Kansas. I went to Kansas City. Very fun. The Chiefs Stadium is really hard to get to if you take rideshare, and you're going to have to walk in your 2-inch high-heeled boots all the way to the stadium, and your feet are going to hurt. At least that was my experience. Maybe if you're a guy. Yeah, it is. It was windy, but it wasn't too bad. Like the weather was actually pretty perfect, but the product on the field, of course, was not where we saw the one of the best pass rushes, a team that's really been able to disrupt in the backfield, have one of their worst games of the season. Well, the worst game of the season. They haven't allowed over 300 rushing yards since 2022 Utah game. And this was before Coach Prime. So this is the highest rushing yard game they've allowed. Yeah.
That Utah game. That one.
Yeah, when it was just really bad. It was before Coach Prime came. It was something that I think we were maybe all really surprised about. I mean, you see Devin Neal, and he is an effective running back. Prior to Colorado, the game before Colorado, he had 925 rushing yards, and they did utilize him. They had a really balanced offense, but once they realized they could use Devin Neal throughout the whole game, they just prioritized him, giving him the ball, feeding him the ball, 37 carries, and those 207 yards was quite miraculous for a team that has been, a pretty stout run defense, really, holding off guys like Taj Brooks. I mean, DJ Giddens was one of them where it was definitely hit or miss, and they took a loss in that game. And as I mentioned earlier, Kansas definitely took some notes from DJ Giddens and applied it on the field. What did you see when you watched this game? Were you surprised about how bad Colorado's run defense was?
Yeah, it was kind of jarring, of course, to see a team that had become, I mean, we talked last week about how the Colorado defense was kind of the rock and the reliable unit on this team. So I'll take the heat for that. Jinx. Because it was ugly on Saturday, but going back and rewatching it, CU had their issues, which I'll get to in a second, but I have to start this by giving a ton of credit to Kansas for their game plan, their execution. It was one of the best team-specific game plans on the offensive side of the ball that I've seen all year, and they really, really executed well on that side. I've talked a lot on here about the second level of CU's defense. Nakai Hill-Green, Levante Bentley. I consider Cam Silman-Craig a second level run defender because he's rolled down into the box so many times. So those three guys have been so good at getting downhill, making stops for no gain, making stops for 1 yard. Even if something does pop, they can make the stop for 4 yards, 5 yards, and move on to the next down. They live to see another day. In this game, that did not happen, and a lot of that was the game plan that Kansas had. They used a lot of motion, a lot of misdirection. You saw Luke Grimm, the slot receiver. He lined up in the backfield. He lined up in the slot. He was coming in motion all over the place. They did a lot of that direct snap stuff where they would shift before the snap and snap the ball to Devin Neal, and Jalen Daniels would be lined up as like the running back. They threw in a couple pass wrinkles off of it. But all of that stuff was holding the weak side linebacker just for a split second, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where when this you kind of saw the limitations of this defense when that weak side linebacker has to hesitate for just an extra second or has to go out with emotion like that. Then those cutback lanes open up. You've got less guys in the box. The way that the stuff that Kansas did before the snap slowed the second level down, and that's been CU's biggest strength. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing is they outflanked the CU linebackers a ton. There were so many off tackle runs, perimeter runs where you see these CU linebackers flying downhill into the gap like you see normally, and then the run bounces outside of them and they're outflanked. And Kansas's Devin Neal is off for an explosive gain. So I think that they use some of that against CU, their tendency of those linebackers being really, really aggressive and really, really instinctive and coming downhill. Um, so I really thought the plan was great from Kansas in the run game. Their offensive line was really good
Mm-hmm.
in pass protection and in the run game. They did a really nice job getting to the second level. You could almost tell that the CU linebackers, they've been kept clean all year. We've talked about how good a job Chidozie Nwankwo has done, Anquin Barnes, the rest of the D tackles have done at eating up blocks and keeping those linebackers clean so that they don't have to navigate blocks from linemen coming up to the second level. And in this game, Kansas's their guards and their center were just living at the second level. Getting out, making blocks 6, 7, 8 yards down the field, helping Devin Neal pop some of these runs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I think Kansas did better than anyone else. They did that just by executing in zone stuff, climbing off of double teams. They did really well, but they did a lot of trap stuff too, kind of like what we saw Kansas State do, leaving the defensive tackle at the snap, getting up to the second level right away. The defensive tackle comes 2 or 3 yards into the backfield, and he either gets kicked out or uh, Devin Neal just makes a miss, which happened over and over and over. Devin Neal forced 8 missed tackles in this game. Jalen Daniels forced 4 on 7 carries.
Wow.
Um, Devin Neal ran for 15 first downs by himself, which is just such a crazy number. That being said, CU tackled terribly. They
Mm-hmm.
did. They tackled terribly. Uh, this and Kansas State were the worst two tackling games of the year for them. And, they lost both of those games. It's not rocket science. I think Cam Sillman-Craig and Nikhil Green combined to miss 7 tackles between the two of them, usually two of the most sure-handed guys on the team. So tackling was a problem. The pass rush was a problem, as you mentioned. Only 5 pressures on 24 Jalen Daniels dropbacks. We talked before the game about get pressure on Jalen Daniels. He'll give you chances to take the ball away. They just couldn't do that. The running game slowing the pass rush down is part of that, but Kansas's offensive line won the day in every sense. And on that side of the ball, it was a bloodbath. I mean, 8 possessions, 4 touchdowns, 3 field goals, and a kneel down is about as good as it gets. And 40
Yeah.
minutes of possession time. It's hard to do much better than that.
Oh no, I was going to mention that. I mean, there was some doubt in my mind that Colorado could really stump this team maybe in a similar UCF way where it's like this is a really talented team. They're maybe better than Colorado, but I feel like Colorado had the upper hand in this one, and I was just really impressed of Kansas's execution. And they literally scored on every single one of their drives during the game, and it was such a struggle for Colorado to get any stops. Like I feel like drive after drive, they were missing a lot of tackles, but they're through that they were just losing a lot of their momentum. And no matter how they adjusted or responded, there just wasn't anything adequate that could stop the way that this offensive line was moving guys around, creating holes for Devin Neals, allowing that offense to really perform at the level that you want your offense to perform, scoring on every single drive of the game. And it was,
Very
and they didn't give Colorado any chance to really be successful in this game, only giving them 19 minutes. I mean, they scored 21 points in 19 minutes, which is,
The offense played well. The
yeah,
offense
the
It was a
defense
very
is
deflating,
bad.
it's a very deflating way to lose. Like it was
Yeah.
very deflating, just like every single time, man, 6 yards, 7 yards. Like they had one drive where they get the holding penalty and Colorado declined it, which I'm not going to get into that. I don't know why that happened. They should not have declined that penalty. But they took 2nd and 11 over 1st and 20.
Officiating was interesting.
And yeah, the officiating was interesting. But they Colorado chose 2nd and 11 over 1st and 20, and Devin Neal popped a 30-some-yard run on the next play. And it was like Kansas had one play in Colorado territory where they got to 3rd and 9, and you're thinking, all right, 3rd and 9, like we're gonna get after the quarterback. We're gonna put some pressure on. We're gonna make a big play. We're gonna force a long field goal. I think they were just across midfield. Passing situation. This is where you want this Kansas team. They ran the ball off tackle for 15 yards, and Devin Neal did not get touched. He did not get touched
Mm.
until he was at least past the first down mark. And I was like, man, that is just such a killer play.
Oh yeah.
Finally, after the whole game of them running the ball consistently, you finally get them in a 3rd and long where you're thinking, now we can get after the quarterback. Now we've got them where we want them. And they're like, yeah, we're just gonna run it anyways. And they run it for a first down. It was very like they took the air out of this CU team over and over and over again. And you could feel that the whole time.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they got 29 first downs, were 9 of 14 on third down, and averaged 6.7 yards per play. And it was on both in the air and on the ground. I mean, 189 yards and 331 rushing yards, 520 in total offense that day. It was just one of the something that just really exposed this defense where, as we talked about, it's such a consistent unit. Usually they come up with some sort of response, a stop or two, but over and over, as you mentioned, it was just like these maybe a 3rd and long situation, just continually pushing the ball down the field, and Colorado could not get them out of the red zone. And they were Kansas was 6 of 7 in red zone attempts in this game, and they
You
didn't stop
missed
scoring.
CU missed this was CU missed Preston Hodge in this game too. They did.
Mm-hmm.
This was probably the first time this season. Like CU's been banged up. They've had injuries here and there. This was probably the first time, other than when Travis was banged up, obviously. This was probably the first game where I was like, man, they really, really miss this guy. Preston Hodge, they really missed him. Colton Hood is a good player,
Mm-hmm.
but Colton Hood used to be the dime corner. You would put him in as the fourth corner, and then in these spread out sets, you could have four guys that you could say, all right, we can cover. Now Colton Hood is the nickel corner. He's the third corner, and Carter Stoutmire becomes the fourth corner. And Carter Stoutmire is a good player. He's more of a safe. They've transitioned him to safety. He's kind of a bigger body.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas really picked at him in this game. It was obviously running into lighter boxes when CU goes into dime, but um, Stoutmire was targeted 5 times in coverage, which was the most on CU. 4 of those balls were caught. They were all by Luke Grimm, the slot receiver that I mentioned for Kansas, who had a really nice game. Luke Grimm against Carter Stoutmire caught 4 balls for 35 yards, and all 4 of them went for first downs. And a lot of, like, most of them
Oh.
were situations, third downs. So that was a matchup that Kansas really picked at when they needed to get something through the air. They weren't explosive plays, they were just underneath. One of them was a slant, one of them was a nice rub route to the left side where Luke Grimm was in the slot. He ran it out after the number one on the outside cleared out, and Stoutmire ran into the pick. But that was something that, when Kansas got into a situation where they couldn't run the ball, that was a matchup that they felt comfortable kind of picking at. And
Mm-hmm.
they did miss Preston Hodge in this game.
Yeah, Preston Hodge will not be back this weekend, according to Coach Prime. He said in the
Straight from the
I thought
source.
he said in the press conference he was going to be back, but I guess he's not going to be back. Shane
And
Cokes is going to
Augusta
be
is not coming back
Yeah,
either.
Augusta is not coming back either. Shane Cokes will be back, and Amari McNeil will be out. So still see how Shane Cokes plays, see if he's fully healthy and ready. He's missed a few games, a couple games. But they'll have him back in the lineup. He's a veteran defensive tackle for the Buffs. We'll look at the defense. I mean, the offense probably put together, as we mentioned, a good game despite not being on the field that much. Shador, 23 of 29, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And Travis, being Travis, got 8 catches for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he tied CU's record for most 100-yard games in the season, which is 6. And it's as good a game you can ask from your players for not being on the field for a little under 20 minutes. um i was I think this was one of those games as well. It's like, yes, they didn't have a lot of time on the field, but I think not being able to run the ball maybe put them at a little bit of a disadvantage and getting more time on the clock. We mentioned like in a couple the Utah game, just like down for down, this team isn't converting as much. And let me pull up my little number here. But Colorado hasn't really been effective on third down, and they scored on 3 of their 7 drives of this game. Um, they let's see, Colorado in the last 3 games, Colorado has only converted 8 of 31 attempts on third down. So I just
Okay.
feel like not incorporating the run game in these matchups is putting Colorado a little bit of a disadvantage. They're still scoring on these explosive plays, but on a from a drive for drive perspective, it's just not the same maybe efficiency you would want out of your offense. When you watch this game, when just from the offensive perspective, what was really working for Colorado despite them not being on the field for that long?
Shador Sanders was working.
True.
That's what was working. I thought Kansas did a pretty good job on this side of the ball too. See you move the ball, but in a game like this, the Kansas they made the margins small by shrinking the possessions, which is great. That was another great thing they did on offense against a great CU offense. Keep them on the sideline, limit the possessions, because then when you only have 8 possessions or 7 possessions in a game, that 4th and 1 that you get stuffed on in the first half, that's a really big deal. In the second half, Shador Sanders takes a sack on 3rd and 1, and instead of maybe being able to go for it on your own 30-ish, now it's 4th and 7 and you got a punt, right? Like those things become magnified in a game that doesn't have as many possessions. That being said, Shador did a really good job in the scramble drill, as always. He found Travis, coming back to the football a lot, over the middle a lot. He did a nice job with that. I thought the offensive line and pass protection played pretty well. That was a unit, they did pretty well in the pocket. They do a really nice job when Shador is kind of shuffling back and up and back in the pocket. They do a really nice job just mirroring the tackles, just mirroring their guy on the outside. That showed up a couple times. Get well soon to Philip Houston, who is out. So we'll see what direction they kind of go at right tackle this week. Um, the one thing that I think that Kansas did that hurt CU at some of these situations, especially the end of the game, CU tried a couple they couldn't get. Kansas took away the deep ball, which is something that we've seen CU have a lot of success with. We've talked about how these CU wide receivers are better than the corners that they're playing against. This game, that wasn't necessarily the case, or at the very least, the gap was much, much smaller against Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant. Shador Sanders was just 1 for 5 on passes that traveled 20 yards in the air. The only completion was the touchdown to Draylon Miller, which was out of the backfield against a linebacker. So they didn't hit any of those deep balls on the outside. Will Shepard caught just 1 ball in this game. Travis obviously had a big day, but his 2 big gains were a screen and a blown coverage. Those were his 2 touchdowns. So for the most part, these Kansas DBs took away those explosive plays. They made CU kind of, beat them with, can you get 8 yards, 12 yards, 6 yards, 14 yards, 5 yards? Like you're not going to get 50 yards with the exception of those 2 Travis Hunter plays. And that's where you saw CU run into the consistency problems that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. And like I said, in a game where you have 7 possessions, you get stopped on a 4th and 1 and you take a sack on a 3rd down, and that's it. Now you're 2 scores down and you're really scrambling. CU was more consistent in this game. They were better underneath. than they have been. But again, that's Kansas. The game plan and the execution that Kansas had made the margins really, really, really small, and Kansas won so many of those pivotal moments on both sides.
Yeah, 15 first downs, 3 of 7 on third down, 6 tackles for loss for Colorado, and 1 sack. I'm just going down the list here, but um, Kansas is legit, taking down Iowa State, BYU, and
Really good
Colorado.
team.
They are screwing up the Big 12, and now it is a
We promised last week that Kansas is not a 4-6, like actually a 4-6 level team.
yeah, that they have certainly turned it
A good
around,
team.
and I feel like they're really a complimentary team on both ends. And Jeff Grimes was really cooking in Kansas City, a game that Colorado could not respond. And talked to Coach Prime after the game. Coach Robert Livingston was calling that game correctly, but it ultimately came down to the execution of the players, down for down, that really created the situation of a 37-21 loss at Arrowhead.
This was
Um,
the first time in a long time where both Livingston and Shermer felt, especially Livingston, has
mhm.
out schemed so many teams this year. And this was the first time, and I don't think his plan was bad or anything. Like this is not a knock on him. It's more of a compliment to Jeff Grimes. But this was the first time where I kind of felt throughout the game, I was like, the OC really kind of got him here.
Mm-hmm. Remember you mentioned that, you texted me and I was like, yeah, it was. Press box, I'd rate that press box a 6 out of 10. There were, at least when I got there, there weren't a lot of snacks, and they were out of water until the water came back, and I really needed water that day. But eventually I got it. So Colorado trying to get back in the win column, and they need to win this game against Oklahoma State to have any shot, any slim chance, and the chances are really slim for a Big 12 title game here. Oklahoma State, as I mentioned, 0-8, really not living up to the expectations that they had at the beginning of the season. Their defense is one of the worst in FBS, averaging 503.3 yards per game. But their offense is what has been really carrying them or trying to get them back into games. 394.6 yards per game. Ollie Gordon's coming off his best game of the year, 156 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in a 56-48 loss to Texas Tech. Yeah, they were just really lighting up the scoreboard down
Was
there.
some
Not,
old big that's some old fashioned Big 12 right there.
oh
That's
yes.
rival.
This is what the people wanted, and maybe this is another weekend where I don't know if it's going to be that high scoring. I feel like the defense wants to get back to what they've been doing, play and execute a much better game here. But um, heading into this game, we'll just go into the quick scenarios. In order for Colorado needs to win this game. Arizona needs to beat Arizona State, and Arizona State is at the top of the conference, 8-2. Is that right? They're 9-2, 6-2 over
Yes.
in the Big 12. Everyone is 6-2. Kansas State needs to beat 6-2 Iowa State. Houston needs to beat BYU. If any of the two, Arizona, Iowa State, or BYU, lose, Colorado is in with a win. And the other outcome is BYU loses from the group and Texas Tech beats West Virginia, for common opponent win percentage reasons. Yeah, so a lot of upsets needed to happen over the weekend in order for Colorado to squeeze into the a Big 12 championship, but it is still feasible. And I think Colorado couldn't have found a better matchup to end the season. Of course, looking at the beginning of the year, it's like, okay, OSU might be a tough one to end with, but now it's their defense has really been what has the downfall of the team. They're not able to close games. They're allowing these offenses to run and pass all over them with 500 over 500 yards per game. When you've watched OSU this year, what has been disappointing with this team? What good aspects they have about them? What are some strengths and weaknesses? You're like, okay, Colorado can beat them.
Well, the defense is so bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to watch bad. It's that bad. They did lose their two best players. Their two best players have been hurt almost all year on that side of the ball. Their two linebackers, Colin Oliver and Nick Martin, they combined last year. They combined for 213 tackles and 12 sacks. Nick Martin had 140 tackles last year by himself. They've been missing those two guys for a lot of the year, so that's a big deal. Those were supposed to be two of the best players in the conference, and that has hurt. And the guys that are playing in their place are not good. They're not
Mm,
very good.
mm,
Uh, the it's hard to even find a silver lining. I'm not trying to grill them, but they're not physical at all. They don't come downhill in the run game. Even against Texas Tech, like 3rd and 1, Texas Tech is like this is in the scouting report. Taj Brooks, like they're running the football on 3rd and 1. And the linebackers are just standing at 5 yards with their feet planted into the ground a second and a half, 2 seconds after the snap, and the linemen are just getting up and reaching them, and it's a 12-yard gain, 8-yard gain, 15-yard gain. It's like, oh man. In zone coverage, they kind of play zone coverage. The linebackers kind of play zone coverage like Madden CPUs, where they
mm.
just get to the spot and this is my zone. I am standing right here and I'm covering this zone. I was like, well, that doesn't totally work. That that's where teams get them over the middle, attack the linebackers. The defensive line is okay, but they're not like moving people. They're not like body movers or anything. And that shows up. This is the second worst run defense in college football. They give up 231 yards per game on the ground, 132nd out of 133 teams in the FBS. We will like some of the rushing stats. DJ Giddens ran the ball 15 times for 187 yards against Oklahoma State, more than 10 a pop. West Virginia ran for 389 yards as a team, and their running back Jaheim White ran for 158 yards on 19 carries. BYU ran for 250 plus. Baylor ran for 343 yards, and Dawson Pendergrass had 142 yards on 6 carries. Six. That's more than 20 yards a
Damn,
carry.
that's wild.
Hodge Brooks had a big day. Scattaboo had a big day. Like I know this, I mean, we've learned all year this conference has a lot of good backs, but this defense has been dismal on the ground, man. They have missed 156 tackles as a team in 11 games, according to PFF, which is essentially
Oof.
you took CU's tackling performance against Kansas and Kansas State and did that every single game.
Oh.
That's like the rate that is pretty much. It's been bad. They can't tackle. They're not physical. The front seven is the second level is not very good in coverage. So we'll see if CU can run the ball. It doesn't sound like Isaiah Gustav is going to play. Flea Harrell said that he's the emergency back right now. He said he can't really protect himself running the ball. So it'll be a lot of Micah Welch, a lot of Dallin Hayden. Hayden especially hasn't been super productive this year. Welch is just kind of working his way back from the injury. But even then, like CU, I just mentioned the tackling. CU's wide receivers should be able to run all over the place after the catch,
Mhm.
making guys miss, making big plays. So I just Oklahoma State's offense is okay. Like the numbers are okay. They're kind of middle of the pack. They're starting a freshman this week, his first road start. He started last week. He made his first start last week. Alan Bowman is on the bench. His
Ooh.
his freshman, I am so sorry if I butcher this. Maluaki Smith. I don't know how to say his first name. He played pretty well last week. Their offensive line is good in pass protection. Their pressure rates are well below 20% in almost every game.
Hmm.
Smith was pressured 4 times last week on 36 dropbacks, and they only ran 4 screens. So that was not like an inflated number by like training wheels play calling. The offensive line is pretty good in pass protection. Ollie Gordon is getting going. He had 200-yard games in his first 9 games this year, and he's now gone over 100 yards in each of the last 2 weeks. Obviously, another really good back. Gets downhill quickly. They run a lot of pistol stuff, so he gets a head start down towards the line of scrimmage. So you've got to tackle well. They've got to be physical at the point of attack. But this is not an Oklahoma State offensive line in the run game that I think can really grind CU like Kansas did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do think that unit can have some success. They have good receivers. Brendan Presley is an excellent slot guy, probably the best underneath slot receiver, um, along with LeJounte is up there, and a couple other guys, but one of the best guys at that in the Big 12. So I do think like this is a talented offense. Smith played well last week. We'll see how he handles his first start on the road. But if he plays okay, if he keeps it together, I do think that Oklahoma State's offense will be able to move the ball some, will be able to score some points. It's just going to be so hard for them to keep up on the other side of the ball. I don't, unless something pops up that I have not seen from Oklahoma State all year, I don't know how they're going to get any stops.
Yeah, it'd be kind of miraculous to stop one of the best, well, not one of the best offenses, but one of the best passing offenses in the country with Shador and all of those weapons. Pat Shermer is really favorite of the screen pass, and we're going to see a handful of those on Friday. I think they'll be pretty effective in that area, and I think it's just too disparate what Colorado has on offense and how bad Oklahoma State's defense been this year. So when it comes to score predictions, I have Colorado. Really, they had a really Oklahoma State had a really high scoring game, and Texas Tech was able to post a lot of numbers on them. So it'll be the first 50-point game of the season. I'll just call it because it's the last game. Why not? I'll say 51 to 30, 38, maybe 35. 51 to 35. That is my final score. I think Ollie Gordon's going to have. I'm just interested to see how the Buffs' run defense responds, especially without Amari McNeil, who's been kind of a pivotal guy and
Yeah.
carrying this front through some pretty tough running backs. They, the message this week was just kind of flush what you did against Kansas and just go back to the execution. And this is a defensive front that I don't know if they still lead the Big 12 in sacks, but they were one of the most productive and really sound fronts that were really putting a hard time against opponents. And it was just a different look that we saw from them. So getting back to what they were doing prior to that game, I think it'll be an interesting test with the former Doak Walker winner. Wow, mouthful this morning. Because he is a really talented running back. He just hasn't really had those bursts, but now towards the end of the season, as you mentioned, he's had back-to-back over 100 rushing yard games. So that'll be something to watch. But I just think that with what Colorado has on offense, there's just no way that defense can really put up a fight, and they're going to be scoring a lot of points there. So Colorado, and I really want Colorado to win this one because I still just am my last string of hope, hoping that they can make it to a Big 12 championship, and everything just works out this weekend, even though the odds are
It's
really against Colorado.
there's a real chance. My score is 45 to 24. I think Oklahoma State will try to run the ball, limit the possessions. I just, like I said, I don't really see it on defense. I'm curious if Oklahoma State shows up like to play in this game too.
Mm-hmm.
They're 3-8. They've got to come on the road the morning after Thanksgiving. It's the last game of the season. They already had senior day last week. Like there's a lot of you know,
A lot of
they're I
motivators there.
yeah, so we'll see what they like how fired up that they are to come play this game. Regardless, the mismatch when Colorado has the ball is too much. I will say that the tiebreaker stuff, like the Big 12 has been chaos all year. Iowa State plays Kansas State, a really good team. Kansas State's probably a slight bit better than Iowa State. That's a coin flip game. Houston and BYU is probably a stretch. At BYU late at night. I think it's an
Yeah.
8:15 on Saturday. But Arizona gets to like Arizona State, Arizona, huge rivalry game. Arizona gets to come in and say we can ruin ASU's season. That's a huge motivator right there. Arizona will show up. They will be ready to play. Are they the better team? No. But like it would surprise me if that game was a blowout. Like I do think
Mm-hmm.
that that's going to be a game. So there's it's not a great chance that things fall CU's way, but I don't think it's some Hail Mary either. Like it is a real, it's on the table.
Yeah, with the way that the Big 12 is shaking out, I think anything is really possible
Yeah.
at this point in time. And I mean, you're right. Kansas State, Iowa State, it's like Iowa State's like been
It's a
up
good
and
game.
down, and it is going to be a good game. Kansas State is not a bad team. They've been floating. I mean, of course, they
They're
beat
back in the top
Colorado.
25 this week.
Oh, yeah,
Above.
Colorado came in at number 25 in the CFP. They dropped from number 16 to number 25. I don't know what they are in the AP poll, but making a CFP with the way that the CFP is set up and everything, that would be the Hail Mary of the
Yes,
postseason.
a lot of Memphis fans for CU tonight.
Mm,
A lot of Memphis fans.
who do they play?
They need a Tulane loss bad. Memphis
Oh,
plays Tulane. CU needs a Tulane loss badly.
oh yeah. Well, those are all our football notes for today, and I'm really excited for Thanksgiving, hang out with my family. But before I get into eating as much mashed potatoes as my stomach can carry, got to talk about men's basketball and what happened in Maui, because the Maui Invitational across the board delivered some of the best college hoops of the
It was
season.
so good.
It was so
This
fun.
is one of my favorite weeks of the year. College basketball Thanksgiving week is so good.
You had all these tropical tournaments. You don't know what's going on. All these teams are playing their non-conference schedule, and all of a sudden they're thrown into these really talented brackets where a lot of teams can be upset. And UConn was one of them. And Colorado was able to get a win against number 2 UConn. Of course, in the first round, they lost against Michigan State. In that first game, it's kind of what like we anticipated going into this tournament, a team that wasn't scoring the ball well, was just being outplayed by simply a better team. And next day, we were all talking about the UConn game. We're like, okay, there's no way, there is absolutely no way that this team, this Colorado team that just hasn't really been producing a lot on offense, can stop, a juggernaut of a number 2 UConn, and really frustrated Dan Hurley. And he left Maui fuming because it was a
He was
73
fuming probably about
72
20
win.
minutes after he got
Oh,
there.
yeah. I saw Ralphie Reports tweet, Ryan Scholes. He's like, I need a Dan Hurley press conference more than I need air. I was like, same. After the Buffs won, it was Andre Yakumovsky who put up the most wild shot I've seen from a CU basketball team.
Great, great shot.
A crazy circus shot layup as he was falling. He threw the ball up and it went in, and that was the game winner, and they won 73-72. And it was just one of those games where it was like, okay, we knew we were going to learn a lot about this team in this tournament, but this was a game. I mean, if they didn't get blown out in every game against Iowa State last night, they did get blown out, and Michigan wasn't their best win. But coming away against this UConn game, you just learned how resilient they are, how tough they can be. It wasn't a clean game but it was really UConn going to the foul. Well, Colorado getting to the foul line a lot in this game, and UConn's key players fouling out kind of not too late in the game to give Colorado some leeway. It was all Liam McNeely, who was really effective from three. He also missed the first 5 minutes of the second half. So there were some talent advantages for Colorado in this game, but they played really hard. Elijah Malone was a key contributor throughout this tournament. Same with Andre Yakumovsky. Yakumovsky had a 4-point performance against Michigan State. I think he had a 20-point performance. He had 2 double-digit performances against UConn and Iowa State, and Elijah Malone only had 4 points against Iowa State, and that was a big reason why they lost. The Iowa State's defense is very, very impressive. Kind of just bounce you around here, but when that UConn game, it really showed this new side of Colorado. It's like, okay, I guess they can contend with some of the top 10 teams in the country, and they really got my hopes up for Iowa State. I was like, they could beat number 2, they could potentially beat number 5, but Iowa State has shown that they have one of the best defenses in the country. But seeing head coach Tad Boyle slide down, I don't know if you've seen the video of him sliding down the slide. That was something that I am going to cherish because it was so fun. I was just so hyped after that game, because anytime you get to see college basketball upset like that and it's the Buffs, it's just like, we just haven't seen that in a while. I mean, I guess we saw it last year at the NCAA tournament, but with this team, the expectations were low, and they were able to really blow some of my expectations out of the water by taking down number two UConn. What did you see in that game, and what are your thoughts on the Invitational overall?
Yeah, the mental effort was what was most impressive because CU played horribly against Michigan State. Their offense was awful. We don't need to get into it, but they played terribly and the expectations were low coming into UConn. And they showed up against UConn, against a team that it would have been very easy to be intimidated by, to be overwhelmed by the talent gap. UConn is obviously a more talented team. But CU came out, they executed really, really well offensively. They moved the ball. Elijah Malone was phenomenal in the second half, so good. Um, they manned up and they took it to UConn in that second half. UConn had an 11-point lead in this game. CU was so mentally tough and so resilient to stick with it. They had a mic'd up segment. Tad Boyle was like, "We don't have an 11-point basket. There's no 11-point play. Stop and score, stop and score." And they really scratched and clawed and climbed back in. And that was so impressive, to see different guys contributing. Trevor Baskin with the huge offensive rebound at the end of the game. Julian Hammond hit some big shots. He had a really, really good week. And
Oh, he did.
his shot making was the biggest takeaway from this week because he made some threes, he made some jump shots off the dribble, contested jump shots. If they can get that from him consistently, that is a big release valve for this offense that they really, really are going to need in conference play. Um, yeah, just different guy. Javon Ruffin had a big three. RJ Smith hit a pair of threes in the UConn game. So I was so impressed with the fight, the grit, the resiliency, the consistent execution on the offensive end of getting good shots. They knocked down a ton of shots in this game, but they were getting good ones over and over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
UConn is slightly overranked, is probably not slightly. They're overranked. Still going to be fine. They're going to be a good team. They're probably
Mm-hmm.
going to be unranked on Monday. They went 0-3. They finished last place in this tournament. They
Oof.
got they got blasted last night by Dayton. But regardless of the issues that, they foul too much, their bigs are
Mm-hmm.
great right now. Liam McNeely was hurt in that game, as you mentioned. But regardless of the issues on the other side, CU played a really, really good game, a really, really clean game. They only turned the ball over 11 times. If you would have said after they turned the ball over a gazillion times at home against all of these small schools that they were going to show up to Maui and only turn the ball over 11 times against UConn, everybody would have called you nuts.
Yeah.
So they played really, really well offensively in that game. I don't put too much stock into Iowa State, the Iowa State game. Iowa State is not overranked. They are extremely good. Both ends
Mm-hmm.
of the floor. They can score. They got really good guards. Milan Momcilovic was on fire. Uh, and if you were to design a team to beat this CU team, you would basically come up with Iowa State. They pressure the ball on the perimeter. They make you work. They make your guards work for 40 minutes on both ends. CU just doesn't have the guard depth or talent right now to be able to kind of handle that. That's a really, really good team. CU coming off of a really emotional win, obviously a huge win the day before, turning around 24 hours later to come and play one of the truly elite teams. I know, like Iowa State was in the losers bracket, but Auburn just won the tournament, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody is on TV right now. Auburn's the best team in the country. Auburn's the best team in the country. Janai Broom is the National Player of the Year favorite, all of which is deserved. Auburn's very, very good. Iowa State had a 16-point lead against that Auburn team on Monday. So that's like Iowa State is at or close to that level of being
Mm-hmm.
one of the very best teams in the country. It's a tough matchup. So look, it wasn't CU's best showing, obviously, but I don't really put a ton of stock or concern in that game moving forward.
Yeah. There's a lot of positives because when you look at the teams across the Mountain Invitational, Colorado is probably the worst team in across the
Worst
board there.
roster,
But
yeah. The least
yeah,
talented
least
roster.
yeah, least talented roster. Memphis was very surprising. Didn't they played they played Auburn in the finale. They finished second place, but yeah, Iowa
Shout
State
out Tyrese
finished.
Hunter.
Yep.
Great tournament.
Yeah. Iowa State is, yeah, as you mentioned, literally the elite team, one of the most elite teams in the country. They finished with 6 double-digit scores against Colorado, and of course, the Buffs turned it over 18 times, and off those 18 turnovers, Iowa State scored 37 points. So that was the, I think, biggest kicker in the game. But you mentioned Julian Hammond and his um, ability to shoot, and he did so well during this tournament, and I think he really showed up. There's a portion in the second half of the Iowa State game that he scored like the last like 10 points of Colorado scoring because they weren't able to get a field goal, but Julian Hammond was able to score and get some, some positive motion going, whatever they had left in that second half. And he scored 16 second half points, 4 of 5, 2 from three. And he scored 6 of 6 from the free throw line. So that's as good as you're going to get in a against a defense that will double team you and really disrupt your offensive flow and rhythm. Julian showed up big in that second half, so something to look at, and he's going to be. I think we're seeing, some of his best basketball as we go through the season here. On the women's side, as I mentioned, they beat Utah Tech at Utah Tech. I don't think they had a stat broadcast because it was at Utah Tech, but 85-73 box score. Sarah Rose Smith. This was the Sarah Rose Smith game. 21 points, 10 rebounds. Huge game from her. And I mean, you look at Utah Tech, I mean, they're still able to put up 73 points against the Buffs, but across the board, Sarah Rose Smith was running the floor there. Lior Garzon and 19 points. Jade Masagayo. I did it. I pronounced her last name right. Thank God.
Nice. Let's
Uh,
go.
13 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and Frida Foreman, 10 points there, 2 assists. So 4 double-digit scores in that game. Kendall would have had 8, but more offensive production than we've seen in the past couple weeks. And I think the biggest burst we've seen from Sarah Rose this season. I don't know if it's a career high or a season high from her, but she played an exceptional game, shooting 8 of 13 from the field, and 3 of those were 3 pointers. She had a big game, and good to see, all these role players stepping up and taking bigger roles in this offense and getting some better offensive looks from, Sarah Rose, who hasn't been the prominent shooter, have a really big game. It's like, okay, she can also shoot the ball well.
Yeah, it's at the very least her by far her highest output as a buff. This is what it's going to have to be, though, right? Like, especially while Frida's still kind of working back into it, they're just going to have to figure it out as simple and surface level as that sounds. They're going to have to get 21 points from Sarah Rose Smith on some nights. Like some nights it'll be Sarah Rose Smith, some nights it'll be Lior Garzon, some nights it'll be Tabitha Betson, some nights it'll be Kindle. Some nights it'll be Jade Masagayo. Some nights it'll be Naimir Du. Like they've got a lot of quality players. They don't have a player who's going to score 20 points a night or is going to give you like the individual consistency is going to be hard to come by, probably even from Frida Foreman because of the way that teams are going to guard her.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, even her production is probably going to be up and down. So, but they're going to have to get people to step up every single night. Frida shot 2 for 8 from three and 4 for 15 in this game. So not her best night from the field. She'll have bigger nights. But this is kind of what it's going to have to look like for them to survive on offense. I'm very interested to see Saturday. They host Louisville, ranked number 24 in the country. Jeff Walls coming to town. So that'll be a good kind of measuring stick in front of the home crowd to see where they stack up against a really quality power conference team. But this was another encouraging game that they are kind of figuring it out offensively. They're getting into a flow, they're getting into a rhythm, they're getting some shots that they like. And even without an individual or two individuals who can kind of carry them, similar to what we saw from the men in Maui, they don't have one or two guys that you can say, hey, we need you guys to score 40 points between the two of you. They don't have that. So they're going to have different people step up night in and night out. Yesterday, that was Sarah Rose Smith. Lior Garzon had 19 as well. She played well. But that's how this team is going to have to live. And it's promising to see, even against some lesser competition, that they're kind of figuring that out and allowing that to happen.
Yeah, Louisville, number 24, as you mentioned, on November 30th. The women are 6-1, and the men are 5-2, with their two losses coming from Maui. So they still have winning records. I mean, it is early in the season, and I wouldn't expect anything less. But both of these teams are putting the pieces together and finding out game by game what works best for them. And Colorado, the men's side, is just turning the ball over way too much consistently. So Tad is still working out that kink for sure. Um, Very exciting though. I was very pleased with the Maui performance, and moving forward, I'm excited to watch this team go into conference play, which doesn't start until December, end of December, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a minute.
December 30th is Iowa State. How fun.
Oh, yeah, every game in the Big 12 is going to be an absolute bloodbath. So, looking forward to that. Thanksgiving, what are you doing today? And what is your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
I will be watching ball and hanging out with my fam. Thanksgiving is the best holiday. Don't at me.
What?
Best holiday.
Damn,
My favorite holiday of the year is Thanksgiving.
you don't strike me as a Thanksgiving guy. Well, actually, kind of, because you do like to eat, and
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is an eating holiday.
So Thanksgiving is the best. My
Are
favorite Thanksgiving dish. Mm, I am a mashed potatoes guy. I'm a
you
stuffing guy
are
too.
you a mac and cheese or mashed potato person? Like
Mashed
what?
potatoes on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Mashed potatoes
I
on Thanksgiving.
agree.
I'm not from the
I
South, so
really like good.
mac and
Yeah,
cheese is like a
same.
Southern thing. I'm a stuffing guy too.
Same.
Kind of like low key,
My mom
but
makes really good stuffing. That's
yeah,
my favorite. And green bean casserole.
I'm excited. Uh,
Same. I'm
Drew Lock
excited.
versus Cooper Rush and Thanksgiving dinner. Let's go.
I have to look at the hoop slate too. I work my other job, so I will be working all night long, which sucks, but it's okay. Got to pay the bills one way or another. And I will
Or root
also be
for
watching
Memphis.
ball.
It's Tulane.
I know that will be a
On
pivotal
a Memphis.
game. Well, that's all from us. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful day. It's a sunny day in Colorado. And yeah, Buffs tomorrow at 10 a.m. Last game of the season, senior day. Might be an emotional day. I don't know. They usually don't really get that emotional. They're just pretty locked in as a team, as a unit. Enough for me. I'm just going to keep saying a lot of dumb shit before this is over, and everyone needs to go and have a good day and eat a lot of food. So that's all for
Happy
me.
Thanksgiving, Buffs.
Go Buffs. Why am I doing this?